Hi, JC. Hey, Julio.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Thank you, everyone, joining the session on finding your highest value customers, topic that's top of mind for many. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlene. I'm the founder of Agency, and today's training is really one piece of our larger 5-part scale training series. So I'll walk you guys through a quick background on me. I spent years at Google, lead generation, marketing, all that kind of stuff. And as you can imagine, a lot of clients that I worked with, over 300 or 400 companies, all the one-on-one conversations I've had, pretty much boils down to the same thing. So hopefully today, as we go through this training, it's like taking all of that and just giving you guys a process that you guys can follow. With that, I'm going to jump on in. So this is our scale method 5-part training system designed to answer each question at each stage. So to get to a more effective advertising strategy, this is the 5 steps that we follow. So number 1, like what kind of growth are we even trying to achieve? This is really your goals. Okay. The second piece, which is today's topic, is all about not just customers, but the customer economics. So not just who you're targeting, but how much you should actually be spending to acquire them and scale sustainably. Part 3 is the where and what of advertising. So this is like acquisition and ads. Which channels should we be running? What do the ads actually look like based on 1 and 2? And then learning loops is all about KPIs and like what does success look like, not just from a metric perspective, but also team alignment. So in marketing, there's a lot of marketing and sales alignment and even product. So this section is all about learning loops, which we're going to get into later or in a future series. And then finally, expand. Now that we have all these things in place, how do we expand? What do we do? Full funnel cross channel. Cool. And then today, like I mentioned, we're going to spend 30 minutes all focused on the second bucket, which is all about finding your highest value customers. So for today, this is kind of the flow to get you to understanding, going from just spending a bunch of money and not knowing who you're targeting to actually getting to your highest value customers. These are the 4 steps we're going to go through. So number 1 is the core, which is defining your ICP. The second is your ideal customer mix. Based on that is, okay, now that we know that, like what actually increases ACV or your average customer value. And these are really your qualifiers, right? So now that you understand who you're trying to go after, how do you qualify them and then message and target them? And then finally, based on all of that, then it's like, okay, what is the cost to acquire them? So a lot of it's going to be math-based. I work with VCs and numbers are very important. So we're going to get really into the data. So if you don't like that, probably not the training for you. But if it is, this is going to be pretty like metrics and data math oriented. So by the end of this, you guys will be able to understand not just who you're targeting, but how much you're spending to actually acquire. So to kind of frame today's conversation, when we think about customer economics or customer targeting, the whole concept here is more leads does not equal more revenue. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know that, right? Who's experienced this? Dave, is that where you're at right now?
Yeah, I think qualified leads are a thing, right? There's a lot of people price shopping, but to get a qualified lead ready to purchase, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And a broader concept in lead generation is volume versus quality, right? So there's at some point, you still need to get the lead flow in, but at some point it's like, okay, well, if 70% of them are not the right fit, what is that actually costing you? And so today's thing, we're going to walk through the economics, the journey, and kind of like trying to find where that balance is. Cool. Okay, so starting at the basics though. So kind of like refresher, in the first earlier trainings, we talked all about goals. A quick TLDR on that is like, okay, before we even get into ads and targeting and all that kind of stuff, it's like, we want to start at the business level in terms of like, what are the growth goals we're trying to hit, right? You're trying to go from 5 million to 15 million. Are you trying to go from like 100 customers to, I don't know, 5x that, right? Like there has to be some kind of goal. And then advertising has to align to that in terms of like what you're trying to hit, right? And so based on that, once you understand the goals, you're trying to drive trials or you're trying to drive whatever, then you can get into the customer. And so here, it's like, when we talk about customers, I want you guys to think more broadly of like, what kind of customers do you wish you had more of? A lot of people just start with like basic ICP, which is fine, like your ideal customer profile. But I think in terms of like really growing your business, think about like, what are the types of customers I really want and who are the types of customers who are actually going to move the needle for me? And so a couple examples to help you guys think through it. If you're a lawyer, as an example, different cases mean different things for your business, right? Personal injury case, lot more value than maybe a smaller employment case or a smaller whatever case, right? So those are a couple like angles. If you're B2B SaaS, a lot of times people just target one campaign and they're just trying to hit this general audience. But if you really break it down, 5K versus 100K buyer, two very different, right? Many times too, we talked about this in the first training, product-led growth versus sales-led growth, right? If you have a free trial version, self-serve, versus like you have a sales team selling to like a big enterprise, two very different customers. And so even Lightspeed with Bradley, right? Like there's like you're going for like a course creator versus like a company. So solopreneur versus enterprise, this is like a really big concept in B2B. Other things are verticals, right? Are you trying to go after construction? There's different verticals that might yield different values for your business and also different customers. And then even consumer, this is just another thing too in terms of targeting. If you're selling teen, skincare, are you trying to reach the teen or the mom? And so why is all of this important? All of this has different messaging, different targeting, often different solutions too. If this is like a solopreneur versus enterprise, more importantly, different economics. Like I mentioned, 5K buyer versus 100K buyer. You want to understand that so you actually know how much you're willing to spend. Does all this make sense?
Yep, of course.
Cool. Okay, cool. Now jumping into a little bit more of the example. So based on that, maybe this is a good time for you guys to actually write down your core ICPs. So maybe think 3 to 5 core ICPs and really think about the pain points that each of them have and the use cases. Does anyone want to like give an example, use their business that we can go through?
I think in most businesses, we have cases where the real value may be in a few conversions versus having a lot of volume. So that's always something we want to have in mind with building a campaign for
Yeah.
emerging.
And then based on that, do you have examples of like different types of customers or verticals or tiers of people, businesses that you?
Yeah, of course. You were talking about solopreneurs, so maybe having like a whole layer buffet versus a single layer working on a case. So there you can see like single cases where we can earn a lot of money of on a single client, and that are looking for higher value instead of lower.
Yeah. And I think the concept here is like, in your case, if you were trying to talk about the B2B example, maybe this is like enterprise, mid, and solopreneur, right? So as you start to move through and understand the ICP, then it's like, okay, what is a typical deal size for them? Like which ones are higher value versus lower value? What increases ACV, which we'll get into the next slide. But really here too, like understanding their pain point, because the way you speak to each person is going to be very different. And there's many different ways to do this. It could be like tiers of businesses. It could be construction person versus manufacturer. But this is like a really good exercise to at least like paint, I wouldn't say 10, but maybe 3 to 5 core ICPs that you could really go after and then start to map out the value to your business.
So I'm with Athenic and we're trying to do like AI stock analysis. So a lot of our high value ICP users are those who are using us to do like more fundamental analysis. So think more like value investor and all. But we also do realize that we have been getting a lot of customers who are more of like day traders, for example, who use our app more so for like, should I buy or sell this? Is this going to go up or down? Or like, what stock should I buy today? So more of like short-term investors.
Yeah.
So I guess like looking at like this exercise, our current mix is definitely more of like the day traders, but we want to move our ICP more towards like the value investors or people who use our app more for like fundamental analysis. Yeah. So I would think their pain points are also very different because like let's say for day traders and all, what will be important to them are like those live simplistic charts like those that you see on like Yahoo Finance and all. But for like more like value investors and all, what is more important to them is more of like, are we able to see through fundamental analysis? Are we able to give, like, let's say, the stock debt analyzing and like benchmark it with the industry, benchmark it at it against like the market as a whole, like in charts, in dashboards, and have like automations that are not just like did the price fall or rise, but more of like what are the news I should take note of with regards to the stocks I'm screening for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good context. And it's really good that you are able to identify that, right? Sometimes people just kind of cast a white net first to see what they can get. And then they start to realize, oh, we're getting actually 80% of these people, and they're not really the right people, where I really want the investors who are doing X, right? And I like to spend a little bit of time here because then you just mentioned too, right? You're like, they have very different pain points. And so then you can start to adjust your messaging and even your lead form. If you're spending a ton of money, as an example, you can start to qualify the people that are probably not a good fit versus trying to get the ones who are. And then eventually you can get more advanced targeting and start to value them. Here too, it's like also different platforms are different. So Google is very like search keyword specific. And so sometimes in the beginning, unless you have really good ad copy and you're doing other types of like branding, organic content, that kind of stuff, it's like you might just get a high volume of a certain people that are related to that term. But like, unless you can really nail the pain point and get specific on that, put it into your ad copy, then put into your landing page, and then put it on your lead form, that's kind of how you start to separate these tiers and shift your current mix to your target mix. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So for something like stock analysis, we're also not sure how to make it like even more specific, such that they manage to sieve out the value investors, but not like the day traders. Like, do we explicitly say that like this is not for like day trading, we're not good for like live pricing data, but it's more for distances?
You could definitely do that. Yeah. So Google search is a little bit more limited in terms, it's just a ad, right? So that is probably more ad copy related and landing page related. You could actually put that into your ad copy, but maybe focus it more on the investment related, right?
Okay.
On top of that, though, another way we qualify people is through other types of advertising. So YouTube, as an example, or even Meta when there's video. As you start to understand each type of customer you're talking to, essentially, then when you create videos, you're speaking to, investor A or data person B, like it's like a very specific person. And then that's your way of qualifying them. So when I work with Service Titan, as an example, right? Like they have like plumbers or HVAC or electricians, right? And so each video was speaking to each persona type, right? And then each had their own specific pain points that was probably more relevant for their business or vertical or whatever. Each of those also might have different costs, right? In terms of value to your business and then cost to acquire. And so then once you start to segment and organize this, you have a clear understanding of like, one, the ones you want more of, two, how much it actually means to your business. So three, how to talk to them and how much to pay for them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good segue. So this is what I'm getting at. When we think about who we want as the high value ICP or the good fit ICP, it's like what actually increase it, like profile, which is what I mentioned, or even behavior. Are there things that they do that might signal that they are going to be more, profitable for you guys? Are there things they do in the product?
So our ideal customer that we're looking for is people that have been affected by brownouts and or huge power losses, whether they're business professionals or, have $4,000 worth of meat in the freezer, right? So it's such a broad, wide angle to go on it, but they all kind of have the same pain point, right? It's a loss of energy and energy resilience. Does that help?
Yeah. So they all have the pain point. And then like, what would determine like how do you make more money? Basically, is it all
okay. So we have some tiers, and I was assuming this is where you can go. I just wanted to get some clarification.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 tiers, right?
Yeah.
Battery only gives you 2 to 4 hours. Then my higher value, which of course is, double the cost, would be our hybrid model and just kind of run on those 2 for right now.
Okay. And is it like a one-time cost or is it continuous? Like,
It is a one-time cost for the most part, and that's obviously a struggle, right? Because all of our contingencies, all of our lead generation get put into one basket
Yeah. Okay.
without any recurring.
Is not reoccurring. Okay. And then what was the two price tiers for battery?
We're at like 25 and 40. Let's say 18 and 30, 35, somewhere in there. So
18, 35. And those are pretty much your two offers.
those are basically the offerings. Yes, correct. Starting at 18, going up to 35, depending.
Okay. And then no larger ticket items.
Right now, I think the generality would be kind of in this area right here.
Okay, cool. That's pretty easy then, right? Because like for you, it's like a pretty similar price tier. Where this really matters is when people have like a high ticket item and then a low ticket item and they blend it and it's like no good, right? For you guys, your play is really volume then, right? And so let's just say you're driving a bunch of leads today. How would you describe the leads you're getting and like
Yeah, we're launching our new SEO marketing stuff, and I have not done any marketing yet on Google. We'll eventually get to there as well. I need to get my website in place and everything else for this new sector set up. We're completing that, getting ready to move on to the next sector. So, lead generation's been, quite frankly, we've done some meta stuff just here and there. Got a couple leads, and then, all of our builder relations and some of our different things there.
Yeah.
I have generated our current leads right now. And I know this is really early on, but I'm trying to like nail it out of the gate.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about lead. So did you run a lot on Meta or just testing? Like, do you have enough sample size?
It's just been testing. And I've had some conflicting things with Meta as well. And I'm still figuring it out.
Okay. This is a good example, right? When you really kind of get into like the head of the customer and like, why would they want your business or your solution? Yours, like I mentioned, is pretty easy in the sense of like, it's really just going to be a volume play. And then now it's more just like, how do we get as many people at this price point? You're not talking like these rare, enterprise things that are whatever. So now your focus is just this, which is great. Then you start to think about, okay, when you mention Meta versus Google, especially for your type of solution, it sounds like it's something where it's very intent based, correct? It's not like
correct. It's not an emotional purchase for sure.
Right. And so in that case, then you want to think about like, where do people express that intent? And so Google, with such high intent, your business model is one that wants to capture demand right when it's there, right? Because if they don't really need you, they're not feeling that like, my power's out or whatever, I need someone, then it's not as like that lead is not as effective, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's something to think about, just, being able to capture intent. And then what would people be searching for to find your thing? Like the pain point. This is the pain point, the use case, the situation they're in to do.
Okay.
And it's very easy, right? It's just intent based. And then you have the ad copy and then your landing page, make sure all three is relevant. And then you will start to get an idea once you start to run, right? Maybe you'll get more insights from your campaigns, essentially, in terms of like who's converting, who's not, and why. And then that's how you start to, tailor the three things that I just mentioned.
Okay, perfect. That was awesome. Thank you so much. That's huge.
Yeah. Easy though, right? It's just volume play. This, I'll give another example where this is where tricky and where you really have to like get surgical. Like another business, as an example, they're like a payment processor or payment platform. Think AR and AP. And so free ACH is like a really highly valuable term, lots of volume, right? They're trying to get leads of volume. But then their highest value customers are people who actually are paying bills with a credit card, not ACH. They actually don't make any money from ACH, right? So it's like, then you have to understand like the volume versus value play and then start to segment that. Yours is very straightforward. Yours is just like, I just need to get as many leads as possible on this intent, on this whatever, and convert them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Nope. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions. Anyone else? This is actually I feel like this is much more valuable if we can like make it for your business. If not, yeah, I'll get into this. This is like, we already touched a little bit on this with Athenic, right? It's just like, once you understand, in this case, what increases the ACV based on whatever these things and even behavior, then this is where you start to map back how much you're willing to pay. And so even in your case, David, right? Like if you understand the final value of your customer, then you can start to back into the math. These are like very common, lead stages, if you will. Someone visits your site, fill out a form, sales qualified, they talk to a salesperson, and then they get closed. And if you know your current rate and you know your final value, then you can start to get into like, how much is this person worth? 50K buyer here at 30%, that's going to be a very different cost you're willing to pay than someone that's $35 in your case. And then final note on this, in the lead gen journey, generally speaking, this is where, again, I mentioned, David, your case is it's much more simple because it's like it's just volume at this kind of price point. This example is more for like, and you might get there, right? But this is more an example of like more complex or mixed businesses that have low ticket, high ticket, consumer versus business. And they need a certain amount of volume. Let's just say they have like 10 people on their sales team. They can't sacrifice the lead volume. Otherwise they have to like, switch up the sales team. And so then it's kind of like, how do we get to the place where it's a good balance between volume and quality? Deeper later. But, first one is, if you want to keep the volume at the existing spend, reduce CAC, find all the ways to make it more efficient, i.e. a lot of the stuff that we talked about earlier. How do we really speak to the person? How do we really get clear on how much we're spending for each tier? And then phase 2 is kind of like, shifting more towards the mix that you want. These are all like real life examples, reducing CAC at existing spend. Literally, once you start to get the data from your ad spend, you can start to understand like, how much am I spending? How many qualified leads? If 30% of them are converting, this is how many customers I'm getting. This is the current ACV. This is the current CAC I'm paying. If I want to get more customers, what's the easiest way I can do? Oh, reduce CAC by 30%. Boom, instant, whatever. Phase 2 is now like, okay, cool. If I have 100 leads and I want to start to shift my ICP, this is my current mix. This is my desired mix, right? These are all the metrics for each. You'll likely start to see for each tier, closed rates, because these are your main customers, close better than like these lower customers. And so you're also willing to spend more because on the upfront, it might sound like a lot, but they actually convert better and higher. So then this is how you start to work through the math of like shifting that mix. In your campaigns, you'll also see like the cost per that you're getting for each of those customers. Then as you're shifting, you can, one, yes, definitely fix the messaging, but then also move the budget and adjust your CPA. That's like those are growth levers that we talk about. I know it's like really math based, but that is really the journey, right? That's one of my favorite things about, digital ads and paid media is that like you get a lot of data points, and it's really just like understanding how to like what to do with it. There's obviously the groundwork of like, yeah, high level, these are like the kind of customers I want to get to. But the second half really is like once you start spending, you have a good handle of like what you're paying for and like what you're getting in return. And then you can start to shift.
No,
Is this
fantastic.
helpful?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm happy to share this with you guys afterwards. I have a bunch of frameworks. Etienne, I've already shared a lot with you guys.
I also wanted to ask, when is like a good time to start thinking about YouTube and Meta advertising or like video advertising?
So there's a couple of schools of thought. Okay. If you're earlier business and you really just need to do advertising and you really need to get customers and you really care about that, when you think about the marketing funnel,
Yeah.
there's already people literally looking for what you offer. And so a lot of people like to start on the bottom of the funnel because they're trying to capture demand. There's already demand
Yeah.
and they're just trying to like get in front of them, right? Like, oh, you need the service. This is why I'm the best. Boom, close, right? So a lot of people prioritize that. And that's typically Google search, AI search, like a lot of intent-based stuff. Meta is more consideration. Also, if you think about consumer behavior, they're more passive. They're scrolling other content. It's more of a social platform. Like they're, and so you're literally hitting them in the middle of that activity. And so that kind of targeting, completely different ballgame, right? That kind of ad is more about hooks, right? Because you're trying to interrupt. And so that's like a whole different game, which is still important, and the cost is different. It's a lot cheaper. So those two kind of go hand in hand. When you do YouTube, that kind of stuff, it's really good branding, and it's really good if you have something to help someone understand what your product does, or what Athena does, or like why someone would use it. Because even right now, I work with so many B2B companies, they all sound the same, right? They're like, oh, we're a B2B platform for blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. I don't even know what that means, right? But until I see a video explaining the software in action, right? Or a customer using it, then I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So that's the vibe, or they're going after these types of, oh, it's that person using, you get more of a sense. And that's a good way of like helping someone understand. And even within that, right, there's so many different strategies. There's branding for people who've never heard of you. And then if you're in the data world, or even in your world, Dave, right, like they know what you do, you can start to use more industry jargon, and then you start to convert and capture,
Yeah.
So in your case, I'd probably do like, I don't know, 90% branding. But again, different schools of thought. Some people just want to get advertising out and they just want visibility, right? So again, it kind of comes back to step one of like, what are your goals? It's totally different KPIs. That's where step 4 of the framework comes in, the learning piece, which is KPI. Branding is totally good too. Completely different benchmark, right? Everything we talked about today was more about like almost like ROAS, if you will, return on the money that you're spending. Branding's a little bit different because someone's not going to see your branding ad and like convert right then and there. It's more about how to get in front of as many people as possible. And sometimes people do YouTube for that because, hey, the CPMs are pretty effective, right? Pretty efficient versus like other CTV players.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. I think that was really helpful.
Good.
Thank you.
I know I barely scratched the surface. If you want me to get into your specific business and criteria, our next training is going to be, what is our third one? Acquisition ads. It's actually like taking all of this piece, exactly what we talked about, the goals and the targeting, and then translating that, like Dave, like what we talked about. Where do we prioritize? Is it Google or Meta? What's the media mix look like? Should I do 10%, 90%? What should I focus on? This is the budget I'm working with. 'Cause if you have a big budget, like millions of dollars, it's easy for me to be like, this is your full funnel plan, right? But if you're starting out, there's a little bit of like, you need to advertise to make money, to advertise more, to make money, to then grow your advertising budget to get there. So the next one is all about the acquisition channels and the ads, and then nailing in on the pieces that affect that. Again, growth levers, right? Whether it's keywords, messaging, hooks, landing page, and your budget. Got it?
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Shar.
Yeah, of course. It's so good to see you. Thanks for joining and yeah, making this fun for me.